random or fun facts about ourselves when we introduce ourselves too.
Okay, we're going. It's official, or maybe kind of.
Certainly looks like it.
Right, it says that it's ready. All right, I think we're going. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the best Facebook Live you're ever going to attend ever. We probably shouldn't make those kind of promises.
No guarantees.
There's no wine involved tonight, so yeah, maybe not. Okay, we are talking all things stock compensation this evening, and I have a lovely panel of certified financial planners, not just certified financial planners, but female certified financial planners. So for those that don't know, who've never looked for a financial planner, 23% of the industry is female financial planners. So you can imagine why you might not have bumped in, but I managed to round up 4 of them in one evening, including myself. And we're going to talk all things stock compensation for women in tech. So let's just start the evening by introducing our lovely panel of ladies. Meg, would you like to go first?
Yep, absolutely. My name is Meg Bartelt. I run a 100% virtual, even before coronavirus made it cool, 100% virtual financial planning firm. I live in Bellingham, Washington. But the firm is virtual, and we specialize in women in their early to mid careers in the tech industry. We are a team of 3, and yeah, I think that's good enough.
That is good enough. Chloe, tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Chloe Moore, and I'm a financial planner. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I also run a virtual firm, so I help clients nationwide. And yeah, so that's me.
Okay, and last but not least, Jane.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jane Yu. I am based in Oakland, California. I also focus on women in tech. Usually people contact me when their company is going to IPO or has recently IPO'd. So, we can talk about that if there's questions from the audience. Fun fact about me, I have a cat named Zoe who might crash tonight. So just letting you all know ahead of time.
Is that her little area back there over your left shoulder?
Yes.
Chloe, what's your fun fact?
Yeah, one that people might not know about me. I'm a classically trained musician. So
that was my fun fact barking in the background. Sorry.
But yeah, I started playing piano when I was in elementary school, and I played for a long time, all the way through high school. I used to do competitions, and also played the clarinet.
All the instrumental things. So I definitely didn't know about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, I didn't know either.
Your fun fact barks. What is your fun fact's name?
Julia, and Julia is an 85-pound mutt of some sort, but probably pit bull black lab mix. But other than Julia, my fun fact is I've had a yoga practice for over 20 years.
Oh, wow. So this is like a real thing that you teach other people to do and you lead them?
No, I'm not a yoga teacher.
Oh.
No. I mean, partly it's because I'm 44. So yeah. No. I mean, if you live long enough and you just do yoga every day, eventually your yoga practice gets really long. But yeah.
Is it Bikram yoga, like hot yoga, or just like regular?
That's where I started, but no, I've moved through all the kinds of yoga, and now just sort of do a vinyasa flow kind of yoga.
Okay. See, if there was wine involved by the end of the show, you might be showing us yoga moves, but no.
There you go.
All right, well, let's get to the topic at hand. So it was really important to me to, one, get a group of women that are very, very educated and knowledgeable together on this subject, but also to show that in the financial industry, we're constantly collaborating so that we can better hone our expertise. So I know all 3 of these young women, because when I need help, this is who I call on. So if there's something that I'm missing out on, or there's something that I'm not quite sure about, it's good to have those people that that deep dive on these topics. So me as a financial planner, I'm focusing on things like cash flow, budget management, student loan debt, and I'm deep diving on those issues. While I serve clients that have stock options, that's not the area that I want to build my practice on. I have a couple clients that have them, because there are all kinds of different clients all over the country that need different types of services. And so they were a good fit for other reasons. But in this one particular area, when I need someone to lean on, these are the three ladies that I go to. So tonight we are going to talk all things stock compensation, because it sometimes is a little bit overwhelming when you get a package and you see, oh my goodness, I have this stuff and it sounds really cool, but I don't get how it works. And then you're maybe a little embarrassed, a little ashamed, and you just kind of do nothing with it. We don't want you to let your stock compensation sit over on the side, to expire, to not be used appropriately. And so this is a cool thing where you can be watching this from the privacy of your own home, learning all the information. No one's going to know, but you're going to be more knowledgeable when it's all said and done. So why don't we start by talking about what stock compensation is? Who wants to share with us just kind of the basics of stock compensation?
Chloe, you go. You're the one who suggested the question.
Sure, but yeah, stock compensation is really it's a portion of your total compensation. So when you think about your total compensation package, you have your salary, you might have bonuses, cash bonuses, you have all of your employee benefits, and then in some cases you might receive some sort of stock compensation. And so that's just it comes in different forms, but it's really just a total part of your compensation.
Which effectively gives you some sliver of interest of ownership in the company you work for, right? Yeah. Usually the value of your stock compensation is tied to how well your company does.
Exactly.
And
so why is stock compensation important? Can someone kind of shed some light on why that is even a thing that is relevant in the world?
Money. Yeah, I mean, I used to work in tech, so I definitely saw that it has sort of this magical appeal to people. Stock options, just people cannot help but imagine riches when they think of stock options, because it does, as we mentioned, it is tied to the performance of your company. If your company grows and does well and goes IPO and is traded in the public stock market, if you have a share of that, if you happen to get lucky and work at a company that does well in that way, you can receive a lot of freaking money. On the upside, if you are lucky, your stock compensation can dwarf your salary. Okay. More realistically, so if you're working.
You've seen people that make maybe like $70,000 a year and have some stock compensation and kind of become overnight millionaires because their stock compensation has done really well. Is that kind of a dwarfing salary situation that you're?
Yeah, most of the salaries I see are in the sort of mid 100s, I would say. Okay. That's the usual ratio. It's like you're making $200,000 and then you get $1 million or $4 million if your company goes IPO. Those are sort of the biggest spreads I've seen.
Gotcha. Okay, I think before we talk about IPOs and what that means, though, Jane, can you tell us a little bit about the different types of stock compensation that exists? So I know there's RSUs, there are ESPPs, ISOs, and QSOs. Can you kind of give us a short rundown of what people generally have and what the differences are?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, that's exactly right. There's 4 types of equity compensation, stock compensation, and the type of stock compensation you get really depends on I'll call it the maturity of the company. So stock options these days tend to be granted at private companies. They're not granted at public companies quite so often, unless maybe you're at the executive level. Incentive stock options come at the early stage, let's say Series B and before. Non-qualified stock options are more for growth stage companies. So let's say Series C and forward financing. Restricted stock units, RSUs, come at late stage companies that are expecting to go public, basically. And then ESPP, employee stock purchase plans, are offered at public companies. And I see them usually at large companies, including older tech companies, I'll call it, like Microsoft, and then even some newly public companies like Asana and Snowflake.
Got it. Okay. So RSUs sound like they'd be the ones that are a little bit more kind of general, broad-based, and given a lot more frequently than the other 3 types. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, definitely. RSUs, I think, are the most common form of stock compensation. And then let's say ESPPs come in second place.
Got it. So Chloe, can you tell us a little bit about, like, if I end up with RSUs, give me a sample company that I might work at so I can get these RSUs and you can tell me what to do with them.
Google.
That was the one that came to mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I work at Google and I have some RSUs. What should I be thinking about as I have them? How will that process probably work for me when I think about like exercising them, when to use them, how they show up on my tax return? Like what do I need to know about these RSUs if these are the kind that mostly people have generally?
Yeah, so I'll start by just explaining, kind of how RSUs work. So RSUs are short for restricted stock units, and it's basically your company's promise to give you shares of stock in the company as soon as you meet certain requirements. And most of the time, that requirement is time with the company. So, the most common thing that you'll see is, you might receive a promise to receive, a certain number of shares, like 100 shares of stock. And you have to stay at the company for, at least 4 years. And so over that 4-year period, you'll receive, just a different amount, like 25 shares each year is an example. So that's kind of how they work. And then once you receive those shares, that's called vesting. And so when the shares vest, that basically comes to you as taxable income. So it's kind of like a bonus. Like if the shares are worth, $10,000, it's similar to receiving a $10,000 bonus from an income tax perspective. So that's how those work.
Okay, so will the taxes already be taken out then on that bonus that I got, and I don't have to worry about like setting aside additional money for taxes or anything like that?
Well, yeah, you can choose to have some shares withheld, basically, and so what they'll do is they'll sell some of the shares and withhold those taxes on your behalf. But sometimes you might have to be a little careful and see, depending on your tax situation, how much your income is, you might have to withhold a little bit more than the standard amount that they withhold for you.
Gotcha.
I wanted to riff off of Chloe's describing it as like it's getting a cash bonus, because I think that's a really helpful way for most people to think about it. Because receiving $10,000 in RSUs, in shares in Google is exactly like receiving a $10,000 cash bonus and then going out to the stock market and buying $10,000 worth of Google stock. So that perspective, I think we've all found, really helps clients figure out what they want to do with these RSUs when they vest. If they got $10,000, would they go out and buy $10,000 of the Google stock? If you wouldn't do that, why are you keeping the shares?
Ooh, that is a really good way to frame it. That makes a lot of sense for me. So we actually had a comment drop in, and someone said that Amazon caps salaries at $160K, and everything after that point is equity. So a good point to know if that is your tech company that you're thinking about working for. We know it's a really big one, but don't expect a big salary, expect a lot of equity.
Yeah, Amazon's kind of unique in the salary capping, at least in my experience. And I think between the three of us, we work with clients in a lot of big, all the major tech companies, and Amazon's sort of basically weird in their treatment.
What are some of the other weird things you've seen across various companies that you all have worked with?
Netflix and Spotify are the two that come to my mind in terms of weird equity comp structures. Lauren, I know you and I have talked about Spotify, where the employee actually gets to choose between just cash, RSUs, in the money options, and out of the money options, which I remember our conversation was like, how do they expect someone who's a UX developer or a tech support engineer to be able to figure this out? I mean, it's ultimate flexibility, but pretty confusing, I think. And then Netflix has this sort of opt-in thing. You can actually, if your salary is $200,000, you can take 100% of that as just straight up cash salary, or you can take 0% of it and buy options in Netflix and anywhere in between. So that's a really challenging decision I've seen for our Netflix clients to have.
So that's when we get to talking more about behavior as well, and what you think the company is going to do, et cetera, before, you're like, oh, I don't need this money. I just want to get more Netflix stock because it's going to make me filthy rich, sort of thing. And how you talk to clients. We'll get to that momentarily.
And I want to add to something that I've seen with a couple of different tech companies is the option to choose between RSUs and stock options. So it's similar to Spotify, but it's a little bit more of an easier decision than
it's not as bad.
Out of the money. So yeah, I mean, those are definitely things that if you have those options to choose between different types of stock compensation, it's good to have a professional to kind of help you think through those pieces.
Do these companies generally have a expert kind of sitting in an office somewhere that you can go to, and they have office hours and they'll help you sort through all of this, or they just hand them over to you and then figure it out the best way you can?
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, I've had clients tell me, they look in the Slack channels and basically they just try to, it's like the blind leading the blind. They just try to help each other and figure it out. But yeah, it's really good if there's a lot of, taxes involved, there's decisions to make. So I really do, suggest talking to, a tax professional and a financial planner to help you make those decisions.
For sure. So RSUs are the main ones. ESPPs is the other one that we said are pretty popular. So can we talk a little bit more about like how those might work? So Lauren that works at Google, I just got a job there, self-proclaimed. I now know what to do with my RSUs thanks to you ladies. What should I do with my ESPPs? How does that part work?
And just to be clear, Google doesn't actually offer an ESPP plan. This is totally theoretical. Jane, you want to do that since you're the one who brought ESPPs up?
Yeah, sure. So ESPPs are pretty much the only example I can think of a free lunch. And by that, I mean, you are allowed to buy your company stock at a discount. So it's usually like 15%. And when there's what's called a look back feature, then it's 15% off of the lower of the stock price on this date or the stock price on that date. And so if you're allowed to sell those shares right away, then an ESPP is a no-brainer. Now, it's a little bit tricky because you have to take out 15% from your paycheck. And so you need to be ready to live on a temporarily smaller, sadder paycheck until you can sell those shares. Now, you were asking about weird situations, and recently I've noticed at some companies like Asana comes to mind and Cloudflare, where employees are not allowed to sell the shares right away anymore. They have to hold them for a full year. And so now that's not such a clear no-brainer anymore, because what if the stock price drops in that 1 year required holding period, a la Lyft or Uber, for example? It could happen. So ESPPs, I usually say 100% do it. Just be aware of like cash flow management, but it's not so clear when there's a 1 year holding period requirement.
Or even sometimes there's not even a holding period, but there are blackout windows, and the ESPP windows don't play well with the trading windows, and so you have to hold it for some period of time before you're allowed to sell it in the trading window. That offset's not a whole year, but it still does create risk during whatever time you're forced to hold the stock.
I think you guys are bringing up some good points too about the risk. So while it is compensation, and we talked about RSUs being just, almost like similar to flat compensation, in general, stock compensation is stock, and stock is something that you are taking on a risk. So that risk is the stock could go up, and that risk is also the stock could go down. And so that's the thing that you need to be mindful of as well, is because just because you have this money today doesn't mean it's going to be the same amount of money tomorrow. It could be less or it could be more. So that conversation that you need to have and the planning that goes into it is looking at, what do I need this money for? How is it going to fund the goals that I have in my financial future? And do I need it right now, or can I afford to take the risk of holding on to it for a year or X number of amount of time in order to be able to maybe get some gains, but also what if I don't get some gains, and can I achieve my goals if I don't do this thing exactly right? So
I think the last decade in the tech industry has made that a really challenging issue for a lot of people, because tech has just gone up. Right, you can pick out sort of individual companies, stock that hasn't done well, And we've never heard of the startups that started and failed. But what we've heard of is the startups like Airbnb, which is now going public at $1 bajillion, and Snowflake, that sort of thing. There is this sense that tech stock can't go down. I mean, try working with someone who works at Amazon and telling them that the smart thing to do is to sell their RSUs as they receive them. They're like, no, I am in fact hoarding as much Amazon stock as I physically can because it only goes up. So behaviorally, that's really hard, especially over the last 10 years of growth in the tech industry.
Chloe, how do you talk to clients about things like that? So if someone says like, oh, but my company is perfect, it's great, it's never going to go down. How do you have the conversations around what, could happen and what they might need to do to reach their other financial goals?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to talk about, just having what's called a concentrated position. If you have, majority of your net worth tied up in this one asset, that's extremely risky. And so, you want to make sure that you have like what's called a diversified portfolio. You have eggs in different baskets instead of having all of your eggs in one basket. Because if and when it does go down, then that's, you basically could lose everything. And also, just it's also risky too, just thinking about like working at the same place where you own all of this stock. Because if something happens with the company, if the value of the stock goes down, if the company's not doing well, you could potentially lose your job and everything that you have. So really just, putting it in that perspective. And I'd say, just as a general rule of thumb, I wouldn't recommend having more than 5%, 5 or 10% at the most of your total assets in company stock.
Okay.
Or any single stock.
I think that gives people a really good litmus test to be able to say like, oh, okay, like now I can go back and do some math and say like, how much of my company stock am I holding right now? Yeah. I kind of want to transition over into talking about IPO. So planning for IPO. So first, what is an IPO? And then how can someone who works at a company that is planning for an IPO plan for their personal finances in light of that information? Jane, you want to go in?
Yeah, sure. So when a company decides to go public, the C-level executives are motivated to do that because it's, this is
who works at a company that is planning for an IPO. Sorry, go.
Oh, it's okay. They want to, raise funds or pay off debt, meet their corporate goals. But also employees want to go public because they want these magical stock options and RSUs to be real money. And so, companies like One Medical, Airbnb, Palantir that have been private for a long, long time. I'm just speculating that there's been a lot of internal pressure as well from the employees who rightfully want to see this IPO happen so that they can translate these options and RSUs into real money.
Well, that's super helpful to just get a good gist of like how this actually plays itself out. Like, oh, like, what do I do? Like, I don't know. Which brings up a good point too about like working with financial professionals. When is the point at which you should engage a financial professional, especially in light of something like this getting ready to happen? You're just like, oh my goodness, like help.
Oh, my honest but entirely self-serving answer is you should ideally be working with a financial professional before your company announces it's going IPO. I know I've sort of chosen to specialize in the Airbnb IPO just because I happen to have a bunch of clients already at Airbnb. And then Airbnb files its S1, and all of a sudden I am inundated with people who work at Airbnb who are like, oh my God, we're going public. Great, but how do I do this, right? Got to reach out to a financial planner. There are only so many of us out there who have this expertise. So my fear is a lot of these employees are going to be left to do it on their own, or following the directions in the internal Slack channel, as Chloe mentioned. And also ideally it takes time because you don't make an IPO, you don't make decisions around an IPO purely mathematically, right? Mm-hmm. Like any other financial decision, you are situating that decision in the broader context of who are you, what do you want your life to look like, how do you feel about risk, and that that takes time to uncover and get the sort of the entire context of your finances fully understood and sort of in place so that you can slot the IPO decision into this existing framework. So I say, you know, hire a financial advisor as soon as your financial life gets really at all complicated, because we're more than just number crunchers. We're really your thinking partners. An IPO is just a particularly good example of a time when you need a thinking partner.
I like it. We are thinking partners. We actually had a question come in. So before we continue the conversation, I'd like to address Ariana's question. She says, I work at an early stage tech company, B Series, and I have ISOs that vest with a 1-year cliff over 4 years. The goal is general wealth building. I already have a sizable diversified portfolio, and I have cash to invest. Hopefully it doesn't talk again. There it goes. Okay. Cash to invest to cover the exercise. The company will likely not IPO in 4 years. What's the step-by-step framework I should use whether or not to exercise my ISOs? No pressure.
Well, yeah, that's beyond the scope of this conversation. I can definitely say that. But Meg, I think you have a good way of approaching this, so for sure.
Oh, well, thanks. Because the first thought inside my head is I don't have a step-by-step approach. There are just a raft of questions and considerations you have to step through. One of the things that came to mind is qualified small business stock, QSBS. If you purchase your company's stock when your company is still small enough, and it has something to do with, they're a C corporation and under $50 million of revenue. So you really need to be like seed or early series round startups. If you purchase the stock then by exercising your options, if that stock becomes worth a lot in the future, you can actually entirely avoid taxes on the sale of that stock if it qualifies as QSBS. So that would be, encouragement to exercise your stock options earlier rather than later. Another consideration is sort of a career consideration, which is if you leave your company, it's quite possible that you will have 90 days to exercise those ISOs or lose them. Well, that could be exercising could be really expensive. And what if you get laid off? Do you really want to be forking over tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to exercise ISOs and pay the taxes on them right at the moment you've lost your job? So one of the things I do is every year, if you have ISOs in a private company, we think about, can we just exercise a little of them, stay under the alternative minimum tax threshold, just chip away at it, don't put too much money into it, because any money you're putting into stock in a private company, you're basically gambling with. So there are a ton of considerations, and like Chloe said, it'd be really impossible to fully address it here. But I like that the woman who asked that question is thinking about it, because waiting until your company goes IPO to figure out what to do with your options, you've just squandered a whole bunch of opportunities over the last several years.
Jane, is there anything that stands out to you about the situation I just described?
Yeah, Ariana, I'll just add that, at the very least, as Chloe and Meg have mentioned, I would consult with a financial professional, at the very least, a tax professional, CPA, or what's called an enrolled agent, EA, and get their help with running a tax projection. Like, okay, if I exercise X number of incentive stock options, here's my strike price, the fixed purchase price I'm allowed to buy the shares at, and here is the current fair market value, also known as the 409A value. Okay, tell me, and here's my pay stub and other information about my financials. Do I have to worry about AMT? That's probably the toughest thing when it comes to incentive stock options. And I have seen some prospective clients really make very costly mistakes where they exercised their incentive stock options, they used up all of their savings, and then got hit with a shocking, I think it was a $50,000 AMT bill the following spring. So, and this person didn't have any money to pay the tax bill. So by the time I got involved, all I could do was help him with a payment plan. It's an installment plan with the IRS. And this person was in California, so the Franchise Tax Board also has installment plans. And by the way, for Californians out there, California has state AMT too. So just another thing to be aware of.
One additional thing do you mind, Lauren?
Go for it.
I'll say about people in sort of earlier stage companies. Chloe earlier had mentioned this idea of diversification. And yes, we're all financial planners, so we're all going to wave the diversification flag all day long. But there is also this notion of how concentration, which in general we don't like because it's very risky, but concentration is what builds tremendous wealth. Diversification protects the wealth once you have it, right? Mark Zuckerberg didn't get to be a bajillionaire by owning the S&P 500 mutual fund. He got to be a bajillionaire by having all of his money in Facebook stock, and Facebook stock happened to take off, and the company did very well. It's a high risk proposition because statistically you're going to be more likely to lose all of the money in that concentrated holding. But that's when you have to get in a discussion of what are sort of the objective elements of your sort of risk situation, and how do you feel about taking on more risk? Any money that you put into options in a private company, most likely you're going to end up setting that on fire. But if on the off chance that the company does well, that's where you're going to see the tremendous payday. And you have to sort of balance how you feel about each of those possibilities.
I feel like stock options are this thing that just keep you on an emotional roller coaster. It's like, oh my goodness, my company's doing great. Oh my goodness, I could, this is an Amazon that I work at, or this is a big Google or something. And like you said, it's only going to go up. And there's all these kind of like, markety sort of things that are happening. And then there's like marketing sort of things of like, this company being public facing and always being in the news. As we gave Amazon as an example during COVID. Like everybody is using Amazon right now. So you get like the feelings from working in that place, but then you also get like the chatter of your friends and family and, the television and everybody saying that they're using it all the time. And you're like, oh my goodness, it's going up. So let's talk a little bit about like the emotional roller coaster that comes with earning company stock. Maybe Jane, you could jump in and talk about, I know you mentioned something called insider optimism syndrome. So tell us what that is and what kind of happens with people who behave in that way.
Yeah, so I wrote a free guide on preparing for your company's IPO, and I included a section on preparing yourself for the emotional roller coaster. So, I've seen over the years that an IPO, of course, it's so exciting. If you're an Airbnb employee, it's like finally, they've gone public despite the COVID nightmare that we're living in. Fingers crossed nothing else trips
Yeah, don't jinx it.
I know, sorry. So it's a happy occasion, but it's also very stressful because you can read as many articles and books as you want. If anyone's looking for more technical resources, I really like Consider Your Options. So you can read a book like that, but that doesn't mean you're going to be prepared to actually take action to sell your RSU shares, to actually exercise your incentive stock options or non-qualified stock options. So when it comes to whatever the form of stock compensation, RSUs or stock options, that whole insider optimism syndrome is something I'm sure all of us have heard from our clients, like, well, I really believe in my company's prospects, and I'm aware of these various projects that we're working on. I really believe in insert companies' names, prospects, but we're here to be the cold bucket of water, right? We've talked about diversifying. We've talked about the risks of tying your paycheck and your personal wealth to your company. And so, there are steps that you can take. You can, limit your company stock exposure, like Chloe mentioned, to some percentage. If what Meg said about protecting your hard-earned money rather than, growing it to some gigantic pot a la Mark Zuckerberg, then, having a conversation with an experienced planner can really guide you through not just the technical aspect, but I'll just call it the emotional aspect as well.
That's super
Yeah,
helpful.
because like Meg said, I mean, it really is. It's about more than just the numbers and just the technical aspects of having the stock. It's about, how do you want to live your life and what's important to you? What are your goals? What are your values? And then how can we use, the stock that you're receiving as a tool to help you reach those goals?
Yeah, I often say to my clients that one of my favorite things to do is to transmute company stock into a home,
Mhm.
right? A lot of clients who, either because they work at Amazon and Amazon RSUs have, gone up a lot in value, or because they go through an IPO, they've got all this extra money on top of their salary that they've gotten in. And like, oh my gosh, what should I do with this? It's really hard for people in their, 20s, 30s, and 40s to think about retirement. It is too far off. So that doesn't have any sort of emotional resonance, but buying a home, I mean, I cannot think of a sort of more emotionally resonant decision. And so that's just a really good example of, you need to ask yourself, what can I use this money for, right? Because I will tell you, you are going to be happier, or, many people are going to be happier if they own a home instead of having $500,000 of company stock sitting around. Like, what are you going to do? Take a bath in your sort of notional stock shares?
Or even if you have $100,000 in student loans and it's like hanging over your head and stressing you out.
Yes.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Chloe.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yep. So there are these things that there are uses for that company stock money that sometimes are really emotionally resonant, very obviously a good use of it. And I also have a lot of clients that, even if it doesn't sort of make rational sense, once they pay off their mortgage or once they pay off their student loans, their financial position just seems to improve sort of dramatically, even if there's no mathematical reason for it. It's just that gave them almost the boost to continue to do the right thing in their financial lives.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes when you can, like you said, have the peace of mind of getting rid of a bill that you felt like you were going to have forever. And student loans and mortgages are those two things, because we know plenty of people that are stretching their student loans over a 25-year period at this point, and mortgages standards are 30 years. So to be able to say like, oh, I took 10 years off of the time frame that I was going to have to do that, or I don't have to do that thing at all, is so freeing for so many people. And if you can kind of, like you said, not reallocate, but kind of shift your mindset to, what could I do with this money instead, in the way that everyone is describing, I think you can have a really, really big change and a really exciting moment in your life where you're just like, wow, like, now what do I do with my money? Now what can I, accomplish?
Yeah.
And, you just have this much, your confidence is ready. So Go ahead,
Oh
Jane.
yeah, sorry. And then one more thing is, speaking of like emotionally resonant goals, with COVID, I've been having a lot of conversations with clients about two other things. So one is supporting their parents who are struggling. Like for example, a client whose mom used to work in the tourism industry in Honolulu. Her job is gone,
Ooh.
and she was not expecting to retire now. She's fairly young, maybe like 67. 67. And so, if you have struggling family members, that could be another emotionally resonant goal, given the times that we're in. A lot of people are struggling. And then another topic that's been coming up a lot is charitable giving. With the god awful, news headlines with George Floyd, do you want to donate stock maybe to racial justice organizations? Or, if there's hunger in your community, giving money to the local food bank. So I think COVID has added maybe a little extra urgency to and planning opportunities, I think, when it comes to company stock and IPOs and equity comp in general.
And that is something to just clarify. Instead of giving, just cash, you can donate shares of stock to charities and so charitable organizations. So, so that's an option that's available that some people may not know about.
And to take it one step further, it's only stock that you have held for at least 1 full year and that has gone up in value since you acquired it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the requirements. Oh, and that you also donate it to a 501c3 charity. There are plenty of really worthwhile causes out there that happen to not be 501c3 charities. Please support them with your cash money, but not with your stock money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all super helpful information. And it's good to bring up those 2 points that, charitable giving and family, because they are 2 big things that come up quite a bit working with the types of clients that we work with. A lot of people are very prone to want to give and they can't figure out how to give. And it's like, oh, but you have this over here. And because you weren't emotionally attached to it already, like, to swoop a little bit of away, kind of out of sight, out of mind, and be able to accomplish your goal of helping others or to be able to give charitably is a really good way to, kind of get people pumped up about like, oh yeah, this stock option stuff is pretty cool. Like, let's do that. There's some other kind of behaviors though that we deal with when we see in clients. So regret avoidance is another type of behavior that we bump into. So this is more like when your client is, well, what if, everything goes exactly as I think it's going to go in my head and my company's going to be great. I'm just going to be so mad at you for making me sell. So talk to me a little bit about regret avoidance.
Yeah, we've been talking about Amazon quite a bit tonight, and I hear that a lot. At a recent public company like Asana, for example, what if my company stock is a home run like Amazon has been? I'm just going to kick myself if I sell it now. Like one way I try to reframe that conversation is, well, you've got this big pot of money now. If you take the actions that I'm recommending, you can meet these goals like supporting your mom, buying a house, whatever it is. However, you can also strike a balance with your future equity compensation, your RSUs that have yet to vest, your stock options that have yet to vest, and benefit from your company's hopefully future growth that way. I was just talking to a client about this recently, like, well, if you sell your RSU shares, sell your existing stocks that resulted from previous stock option exercises, and then take action on your vested options, that means a substantial down payment is ready to go. And then the future to be vested stuff, you can still benefit from, I hope, your future's company growth.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. Chloe was mentioning a rule of thumb that I think most financial planners are familiar with. Like, you don't want more than 5% of your investment portfolio in any one stock, and especially not if that stock is your company stock. Yes, that is sort of the rule of thumb that we all sort of start with. But like, there's a world of possibilities out there. We're going through sort of planning meetings with our Airbnb clients right now. Some of our Airbnb clients have 90% of their net worth tied up in Airbnb stock. Do I think I'm going to get them down to 5%? No, I don't. But if I can get them down to 80%, that's better, right? I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for progress. So you can, people can take that same sort of, graceful approach with themselves. You don't have to get it perfectly right. Just make an improvement in your situation.
Gotcha. So there's one other kind of behavioral thing that kind of comes quite frequently when we're dealing with, like you said, clients and what they want to do or don't want to do and what they're thinking as it pertains to stock that might hold them back from reaching their goals. And Jane likes to call it break-even-itis, also known as anchoring in, our actual financial planning books. So, talk about what anchoring is and, well, break-even-itis is and how clients kind of demonstrate that and how we can help them get out of that.
Yeah, so I have seen this with my clients at companies where the stock price pretty much just dropped, right after the
Lyft.
IPO. Yeah, Lyft. Sorry if any of my clients are watching tonight to pick on your company, but they went public at 72. I think they briefly went up to 88, and then it's just been downhill ever since. I think it's currently trading at maybe like 27, something like that. So a couple of my clients at Lyft, when we'd be talking about the RSU share strategy. I would give my usual spiel, like think of it as a bonus, just sell and use the money for your goals. But then clients would say like, well, the stock price, if only the stock price could go back to 50, or, pick some arbitrary reference point that's anchoring. If only it could go back to 50, then I feel better about selling. And I would try to do the math and say, okay, if you held out for an extra $2 a share, that's not going to translate to a huge amount of money. So let's get you more comfortable with selling the stocks, even though it is so disappointing to see that what started out at this high number is now, has now dropped to less than half of that number. So it's about making progress. One of my clients told me, you know what, Jane, like if I didn't hire you, I would probably have done nothing. And I would just have this even bigger pot of Lyft shares that would be stressing me out, that would have dropped in value. So I was really grateful to hear that. So yeah, making progress, taking some action is better than, I think, than doing nothing.
Yeah, and I didn't want to throw Lyft under the bus. I mean, I went through the Uber IPO, and it's not quite as bad, but it's the same dynamic. It IPO'd up here and just went afterwards. One of the things I definitely see anchoring biases in my clients, going through these Airbnb planning sessions, they're anchoring on things like, what was the 409A valuation at the end of last year, the last one before coronavirus? What's the last price they sold stock for in the private secondary market? What's the last price that their friend sold stock for in the private secondary market? And so that's what they're hoping to get when Airbnb goes public. And it's all a gamble. Who the hell knows what any stock price is going to be in the future? One of the approaches I take, in sort of the spirit of it's not about perfection, it's about progress, is let's set up a sales schedule so you're selling at least some on a regular basis, regardless of the price. Maybe we will sell more on days when the price is higher and less on the days when the price is lower, but we're at least steadily whittling away at this like giant 90% of your money is tied up in this one company concentration.
Chloe, anything to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that's key, is just just thinking about the possibility, the range of possibilities, and just committing to making some level of progress.
I like it. So it sounds like to me that stock options could be really awesome, but they could also cause you a lot of stress. And it sounds like very, very infrequently they're not so awesome. But for the most part, like this is something that's going to be a great opportunity, a great way for you to create wealth within your life, and to also help you achieve a lot of financial goals. It can also kind of be seen as like the golden handcuff. So like you have these stock options, but you don't know exactly, what you should do, or you don't know that another job is going to have those options available to you. You don't exercise the options, or they have really long vesting periods, as mentioned in one of the questions. So talk a little bit about this idea of the connection between this equity and your career goals, your career values, the decisions that you decide to make, and how these things can become the golden handcuffs.
I think I'm the one who submitted that question, so I'll take it because I already know the answer, at least the one I want to give. Yeah, this is something I started thinking about this in response to two clients who were sort of simultaneously going through the same situation, which is they had been granted ISOs at a private company. They'd held the ISOs for several years, hadn't really exercised them. The the value of the company had grown. So now it was quite expensive to exercise a lot of their ISOs because they were going to incur alternative minimum tax. And they didn't really think they were going to be at the company for that much longer. That was sort of wasn't in their career future. But they felt sort of trapped there because they didn't have the money to exercise all the options that were available to exercise. And that's why I was mentioning earlier this idea of one tactic you could take is just exercise a little each year of your ISOs. So you're avoiding AMT, and so you're whittling down at that bucket of exercisable options. So you're either A, not too disappointed to leave them behind, or B, able to exercise whatever remains if you want to leave the company. So that's sort of career thinking to get out of a company. And when it comes to starting to work at a new company, you can negotiate for whatever the hell you want. I mean, you can negotiate for a higher salary, more vacation. You can also negotiate to replace stock compensation that you lost at your old company. So if you did abandon an RSU schedule that wasn't fully vested or options that weren't fully vested, see if you can get that made up for at your new company. Not guaranteeing that it'll happen, but that is an element of your total comp package you can negotiate for.
So the idea is that generally stock options come with some vesting period, and if you leave a company and they have not yet vested, you lose what has not vested. Is that kind of across the board how it works, or is it sometimes you get them no matter what you leave the company, you can take them with you, or is it sometimes that if you ever leave this company, you either take it all now or you never get any of it, sort of thing? Have you seen kind of those options?
I mean, I'll keep on talking, but you guys want to take that?
No, go ahead.
Oh, all right. Typically, the way it happens is when you're first granted a stock option, you have to wait for it to vest. Once it vests, then you can make the choice about whether or not to exercise it. So fast forward 3 years, you've been granted stock options with a 4-year vesting schedule. Some of them have vested, some of them have not vested. If you leave the company, you are definitely going to lose the ones that haven't vested. But the decision up to you right now is, oh, I've got all these options that have vested over the previous 3 years that I am allowed to exercise, but do I want to actually risk the money of exercise them, or do I even have the money to exercise them before I leave the company? Historically, what happens if you have ISOs, you have 90 days after you leave a company to either exercise them or lose them, just gone forever. That's changing. Some companies, I think Asana is a good example. You don't lose options just because you've left the company. You have 10 years from the date they're granted to exercise, whether you're an employee or not. So that's an awesome development for employees, but it's something you need to look at in your stock option grant document. Like, what are the expiration terms? What happens? Look for the word termination. What happens upon termination? Just know by when you have to exercise your options or lose them.
Yeah, and I'll say too, just to add to that, if you do receive any kind of stock compensation, you will receive grant documents, and so you want to make sure that you do read through all of those documents and understand exactly what are you receiving, what are the rules around it, what happens if you leave the company or if you're terminated, and just all of those aspects, the vesting schedule. Those are important things that you need to understand, and it starts with reading those documents.
All right, we have covered it all. I have learned at least 3 new things that I didn't know as a financial planner who's seeing this stuff on a pretty regular basis. So thank you all for sharing all the knowledge. I think to wrap up, I'd love it if you guys could give kind of, if you take nothing else away from this, here's the steps. So everybody give maybe 1 step. By the end, they'll have 3 steps that they can go and take meaningful action. Each of the people, or all of the people that are participating, can go take meaningful action to get a grip on their stock options and do something for themselves to better understand their compensation.
I'll go. Calculate. This doesn't really apply to sort of early private companies, but big private companies or public companies, calculate how much of your net worth, how much of your portfolio, how much of your money is wrapped up in this company stock. What percentage?
Okay.
And are you okay with that risk?
Right. Yeah, we talked about the 5% rule quite a bit tonight. And so if you haven't done the math and you don't know,
Mhm.
the first thing is going to be taking inventory and seeing that number and understanding, okay, well, 70% of everything I have is this stock. And how does that feel? And that's a good one. Chloe?
Yeah, I would say, just think about what are your financial goals? What are the things that you want to accomplish? Do you have loans or debt that you want to pay off? Do you want to eventually, buy a house or just, purchase other things or accomplish other goals? And how can you use, the stock that you have to help you meet those goals?
I like it. I like it. And last but certainly not least, Jane, share with the viewers tonight one thing that they can take into action.
Yeah, at the very least, I would recommend speaking with a tax professional to understand the potential tax expense of exercising your stock options, of an IPO turning your RSUs into real money, so that you're not surprised when next April 15th rolls around and you're prepared with enough money to pay your tax bill.
Yeah, I love that. So we've got get an accountant, understand your goals, and then take an inventory of how much of your compensation is actually wrapped up in your stock. Those are 3 very easy, meaningful things that you can do on your own to take away from this and put yourself in a better financial situation. Of course, we would all prefer, everybody's humble and not trying to sell here, but at the same time, you need a financial professional. And you don't just need a financial professional, you need someone who knows this stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got 4 young ladies, 3 of which, like you said, I've already said are experts in this. I dip my toe in here and there. But these 3 ladies know their stuff. They're certified financial planners. Which you want to be working with someone who has gotten the expertise of being a certified financial planner because they have education, experience, they've taken an exam, and they're upheld to a code of ethics. So it sounds crazy, but not everybody in the financial industry that calls themselves a financial advisor or wealth manager is a certified financial planner, and they don't have to jump through those same hoops that the 4 of us did. So that's something you want to consider as you think about getting a financial professional. I'd also say to look for somebody that is fee only. So if you don't know what fee only is, spend a few minutes Googling that. That's going to be my action item for you all, is to learn more about the various types of planners that exist out there and the various ways that they are compensated. So a fee only advisor.
Shameless plug, Lauren and I did an episode about that. And just what to look for, with financial advisors and different types of financial advisors. So you can check that out.
I'll drop the link to that episode. So if you want to learn more about financial planners in general. To find yourself that is a CFP, fee only, and fiduciary, and you will be in a really good situation, whether you choose one of us, which you should, or if you choose someone else. So without further ado, I want to give everybody a chance to tell people where they can find you, like I said, what you want to help them with, or what your area expertise, who you work well with is probably the easiest way to say that. So go ahead and stand on the podium. Chloe, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, I work well with any young professionals in their 30s and 40s. I mostly work with women in tech and also people of color and people in the LGBTQ community. So yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I can be found on social media, Facebook and Twitter at FinStaples, Instagram at Financial Staples, and my website is financialstaples.com.
All right, and I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. Jane, it's your podium. Stand on it.
Okay, great. Yeah. So you can find my website at janefinancial.com. I blog regularly. I mentioned the free guide that you can download too if you want the IPO 101 guide. I'm on social media as well, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, if you look up Jane Financial. Yeah, that's all I've got.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Meg, tell us where we can find you.
Absolutely. My website is FlowFP. Flow as in water flow, FP as in financial planning. So flowfp.com. Also have a blog, which is weekly-ish. And you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I mean, I'm also on Facebook, but honestly, I don't spend much time there. So Twitter and LinkedIn, Meg Bartelt. You'll probably misspell my last name, so you should probably just come to my website. And who do we work particularly well with? I mean, I think all three of us have the same basic, community of women we work best with, women in their 20s, 30s, 40s in the tech industry, dealing with all the career and compensation issues in the tech industry. And people who are really looking for that thought partnership. I love working with people who really show up for the conversation, and value having someone that they can collaborate with. I am not you should do this, you should do that, here's a spreadsheet kind of person. The best decisions are going to originate inside the client's mind and heart. I'm just there to sort of guide the conversation.
I love it. I love it. And I think you bring up a really good point is, we all collaborated tonight to bring this information to the audience. And in the same way we collaborate on a regular basis is because we have an abundance mindset. So we want people to work with the best financial planner for them. So you've got three people that are really well versed in this topic, but there may be a personality fit, someone that you connected with more tonight, and it's perfectly fine. There's tons of women in tech that are not being served.
Mm-hmm.
If they actually all start to get financial planners, the three of them are going to be really busy and they're going to reach capacity at some point. So there is more than enough out there. Pick someone that works well for you. Make sure that they have your best interest at heart, and you should be in a really good position financially for years to come. But the first step is to reach out to a financial planner. So with all that being said, let's head out. It was lovely chatting with you ladies this evening. Thank you for getting
Lauren.
on. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge. I really, really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Night.